In today's video, I'm going to show you how I plant out my scallions. These are my scallion seedlings that I've been growing and trimming, and I have a video on why I do trim the seedlings, so if you want to check that out, I'll link it for you below. But today I'm going to share some best practices that I've learned over the years for planting out scallions. And I don't know about you, but for me, they're kind of like herbs in that sometimes I need them for a recipe, but I really only need like one or two. And they come in like a whole bunch at the store, and usually the rest of them end up going bad in my produce drawer. So they really are something that I like having handy, growing in my backyard, and then when I need a couple, I can just pluck them out and use them as needed. Welcome to True Freedom Permaculture, where I show you all the tips and tricks you need to have a green thumb, even if you weren't born with one. Let's head outside to my garden and get started. Let's talk location. So scallions enjoy being in full sun, and in my experience, they also need a fair amount of water, or else the ends start to dry out and get a little bit crispy. So when I was selecting my location, I thought a good place would be my old hugelkultur bed, which if you saw my video on when I created it last year, you'll notice that it's shrunk down quite a bit, which is normal. The wood has been decomposing, doing what it's supposed to do. So I had some things grow on it last year, and now this year I planted some dahlias in here. And the reason I chose this site is because dahlias also require a fair amount of water. So if I'm gonna have things that have the kind of the same amount of water requirements, I think it is more efficient to group them together. So that way it's like I just know that I have to keep watering this bed. It's also close to my water source, so it just makes things easier and faster. And the other thing that I wanted to do is to clear out, I have a lot of this growth in front of the bed, and it is to the south of the bed, so it's going to be blocking some of the sun. And because the scallions are still pretty tiny, I definitely needed to clear this out to make sure they weren't obstructing the sunlight. So that is what I was working on first thing before I even planted the scallions out. Then I prepared my bed by taking a garden fork and just gently forking open the soil. This way it would allow the roots to establish a little bit easier, and it also aerates the soil gently. Now it was time for me to plant out my scallions, and I just took them, I grew them in an old container that I had, a recycled salad container. And if you've seen any of Charles Dowding's videos, which I highly recommend if you haven't, it's really great, but he suggested planting onions in groups of 3 or 4. And I tried this a couple years ago, and I really liked this technique, and I do think that they grow well together. So when it came to getting the scallions out of my container, it sounds kind of corny, but I like the idea of them being with their friends, so to speak. So I chose the ones that were kind of clustered together already in groups of 3 or 4, and I planted them together. And if there were some that were by themselves, I just kind of tucked them into some where there were maybe only 2 scallions, let's say, so that made groups of 3 or 4. And I just did this, I planted them about 4 inches apart, and I just find that they grow nicely together, and as they grow, you can just harvest the ones that are getting full size, and then that lets the smaller ones continue to grow and develop. You can certainly choose to direct sow your scallions. I choose not to because I like the fact that I can get a jump start on these and direct sow them inside 8 to 10 weeks before my last frost date. It's one of the few crops that you can really do that with, and I like to get that started and underway before all the craziness of spring comes when you are starting everything else. So that is the reason why I start mine indoors and I transplant them out. Now you'll notice when I'm transplanting these seedlings, I'm not planting them super deep in the soil. You really don't need to. In general, I just kind of make sure that the white parts are covered, which for these tiny seedlings is really anywhere from maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And especially because I knew I'd be adding more layers, as you'll see later on in this video, of compost and mulch, I really basically just made sure that I added enough potting soil that they were anchored into the ground, which, you know, sometimes I would backfill with a little bit of the extra potting soil in the container, and I would just make sure that the roots were covered. I also made sure to remove any really large pieces of mulch surrounding the scallions while I was going along, because they are really delicate and fragile at this stage, so if I have a huge wood chip, it might kind of like knock the scallion over, or cover it, or break it, so I just kind of tossed those aside. I simply repeated this process all along the south side of my bed until I had planted out all of my scallions. Before I added the next layers, I made sure to give them a good soak. Just like us, Scallions require food to survive, and while they're not as heavy feeders as bulbing onions, their stems do get more green and vibrant the better the earth is around them. And so I would suggest adding a little bit of organic fertilizer or compost if you have it. Now my compost, I don't wait until it completely has broken down, because I swear things like avocado pits or onion skins, or you might see bits of eggshell in here, they take forever to break down fully. So I just go ahead and put it on the plants. I kind of top dress them with this layer of nice rich compost. Now I do wait until there's no smell of rotting food. It just smells like clean, fresh earth, and it has largely broken down, as you can see. And I just gave it a good soak in some water too, so that way it wasn't wicking up moisture from the watered seedlings that I had put down. So went along and did this and just kind of tucked them in with a little bit of food. Next, after the compost, it was time to put down a layer of mulch. And I used wood chips, and I put down about an inch thick layer or so. This way it would help to suppress the weeds and also help to retain moisture. The final step was another watering. Can't wait for these to grow so I can add them to dressings or as a garnish on top of stir fries. I even put them in some kimchi. It's really delicious. They are fantastic in eggs. I just think scallions make everything taste better. After that, I had definitely earned a nice cool drink of water and a rest on the rocking chair. I wish you all some happy scallion planting. And if you have any suggestions for videos you would like me to create for you, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Some of you already have, and I already put them in the pipeline for videos that I'm going to be making for you down the road. So I do listen to them. I really like hearing from you, and I just want to make more of things that you want to see on topics that you'd like to learn about. So that's all I have for today, and I will see you all soon.